first. And the first people on medication being first.
Chapter 14, page 128 in the textbook, 43 in the ring, oh, no, not 43, I lied. 91 in the ring binder, 128 in the textbook, 91 in the ring binder, 19 in the ring binder. All right, this is a short chapter on documentation, and so we will cover kind of the rules to documentation, and then I've got just a small little activity for us to do. So, one of the things that's not in your notebook that you might want to write down is the mnemonic SOAP. And SOAP stands for Subjective Objective Assessment Plan. In your book, it talks about subjective and objective reporting, but this is a really good mnemonic to kind of help you understand what to report, when to report, and how to follow through with it. The S is subjective. And probably the easiest way to remember that is what the resident said. So if you go in the room and Miss Lawless says, "My chest hurts," that's subjective reporting. Objective is what you observe. So just use the O in objective for observe. So that if I look at Miss Lawless's chest and there's a big bruise there, then I would observe and chart the bruise. If there is something going on, we go to the charge nurse. She comes in and she does a higher level assessment. So now, more than just you observing it, they have the knowledge base to come in and maybe palpate on the chest, have her take a big breath, feel the rise and fall of her chest, maybe take the stethoscope out, listen to her breath sounds. They're required to do a higher assessment. And then P is to create a plan. Now we'll take a scenario that really happened and we'll take it the way it happened and then we'll modify it. We really did go into Miss Lawless's room one morning and said, "How was your night?" And she said, "It was terrible, my roommate hit me in the chest." And so that was her subject, a roommate hit me in the chest. We looked at her chest, there was nothing there, no redness, no bruising, no scratch, no irritation. There was no indication that there was any kind of injury. We still went ahead and went to Cheryl and reported it and said, "Miss Lawless said this," subjective, we looked objective. She goes in and she said, "Miss Lawless, they said you had a bad night." She said, "Yeah, I told them Marcella hit me in the chest." So then she does the further assessment. She looks at the chest, she listens to her breath sounds, has the rise and fall of her chest, everything's normal. So the plan is to talk to Marcella and tell Marcella what happened, ask what happened, and Marcella said, well, she wouldn't shut up. And Marcella admitted that she'd gone over there and slapped her. So the plan really involved more what to do about the roommate dynamic. Now, if the same thing had happened, if Miss Lawless said, "My roommate hit me in my chest," subjective. Objective, you look and there's a huge bruise over her rib cage. Still going to go to the charge nurse. She's going to come in. Now she goes to feel on the chest wall, and Miss Lawless goes, oh, don't touch that. Or says, "Take a big breath," and Miss Lawless says, I can't, it hurts too much. Then her plan would be to have her go to an acute care hospital, get an x-ray, further evaluation. That becomes the plan. So it works really well no matter how you use it. And it's really interesting, we use this more in our everyday life than we realize. An example, if you have children, is your kids bring a report card home. Subjective, "How did you do on your report card?" "I did great." "Let me see it." Objective, "Oh, you did do really well in everything except math. What's going on there? We've got a problem." So he said he was okay, I observed math's a problem. So we talk about why. "Well, those days I was out, they did all the multiplication tables, and I missed that whole thing, and so I feel like I got behind, and that's what happened." Okay, well, here's our plan then. Every afternoon, when you come home, we're going to spend 30 minutes on multiplication tables. We're going to get you back up to speed so we can get that math grade up. So you really just use that same mnemonic in life, whether you realize it or not. Now, when you go to actually chart in the medical record, we are getting to computerized charting, but long-term care facilities are not 100% there yet. As you guys saw, you saw the screens and then you saw the paper charts. So there's about 7, 8, 9 or so rules to charting. These are listed in your book as well as I think in your ring binder. The first one is make sure you have the correct chart, the right patient. You don't want to be charting obviously on somebody's other chart. The second thing you want to make sure is you want to make sure it is neat, clear to read, and that the spelling is okay. Now the main reason, 2 reasons. One is somebody behind you needs to see what the shift was like. But even more, when you go to court 2 years from now, they're liable to slide the chart in front of you and say, "Is this your handwriting?" "Well, yes it is." "Can you read me what you put in there?" If you can't read it, it's a problem. There can be no erasing, no scribbling out, no whiteout. Makes it look like you're hiding something, so you never want to do that. You must write in pen so that it can't be altered. If you do have to make a correction, because you've written something wrong or you spelled it wrong, you're going to put one line through it, your initials, and then put their correct information. That way they know who made the modification of the chart. There's no doubt that you can read what was underneath that line. I'm not trying to hide anything, and that goes there. You want to make sure it is brief but accurate. I don't need to tell a long story about what happened that morning. It has to be truthful. Obviously, we're not going to falsify the information, but keep it to be brief. The more you write, the more you can get yourself in trouble. Don't use your opinion. I think, I feel, she should. Those are opinions. I need factual information, so we want to leave opinions out of it, only facts. You need to chart in real time. Now, sometimes that's very difficult because I've gone in to change a resident's brief. They are severely soiled, stool from head to toe, so I'm in there 20 minutes trying to get everything cleaned up and the bed changed and them changed. And now I come out and I want to enter 10 a.m. that I went in and found this brief, but somebody did something while I was in there and charted something. So what you would do is you would go in and put LE, which stands for late entry, put the real time and then your note. Even if there's a 10:15 above it, they know you came in and it really happened at 10, but you couldn't chart it until 10:15. So make sure you do the best you can to chart it in real time. All right, so those are the major rules for documentation. Now, I'm going to give you a piece of paper. On this piece of paper, there are no less than 20 errors. Okay? I want you, and you're not going to turn it in, but I want you to go through here and see if you can find the 20 errors, and then we'll talk about it and see if you found it. They're all going to be from what's listed in the book and what I just listed on the board. In there?
Oh, I've been told make it short.
Yep, make
Facts.
it brief, factual, absolutely. Now, the things that you primarily will be charting. Intake, which is your food and fluid. Output, wet briefs and bowel movements. Turning, to include skincare and behavior. That's kind of the key things that CNAs are going to report or chart. The other thing is vital signs. We had a situation in clinical where when we're there, sometimes we're asked to do the vital signs of those who are scheduled to have vital signs done. And there's a piece of paper that sits at the nurse's station, and when you did, you write it in. We had gone to write in our vital signs on the couple of residents that we had, and I was looking down the list, and under respirations it said 1918, 1918, 1918, 1918, 19, 1918. Not kidding. Now, is there any way that all those residents had respirations of 1819? I mean, that clearly is false documentation. How do we prove it? I mean, it doesn't look right, but unless somebody was standing there, you can say, well, it may be 36 now, but when I was there, it was 18. So they really can get away with false documentation. When I went down the line of the pulse, they were all in the 60s. 62, 64, 66, 64, 62, 68, 64, 66, all the way down. Again, no way that that is the case. So, when you're doing vital signs, if you're having trouble getting them, tell somebody, but write it accurately, because that's going to have a huge bearing on somebody that's going to intervene. Because if you look down this whole list, all 13 people were perfectly fine in terms of their vital signs. And then temperature you can't really mess up because it's digital and it'll beep out and they could write it. But everything else had a pattern to it. Even getting to blood pressure had a pattern. I actually made a copy of that. I'm not supposed to, but I made a copy of it to have here to show that this is what's still happening in terms of documentation.
That's I mean, as a med tech, that is mostly important, because if you have a drop or a rise into a vital sign, then there is cause to know that something may be going on.
Oh, absolutely. So if I have a slow heart rate, it may be related to medication. If I have a slow respiratory rate, it may be related to the medication. If I'm on blood pressure medicine and I go and the blood pressure's low, I probably need to call the doctor about modifying or doing something differently. So absolutely. I mean,
we also referred with them when falls happen.
right.
Because if you have a drop in a blood
Right.
pressure, that means
Right.
that may
They
be
made
a cause to why they
Exactly. They might have had a syncopal episode and that kind of. So you're right. I mean, they're not just getting out of work. They're not just making their life easier. They're impacting the care of that resident. And we just have to make sure that doesn't happen. So again, the main thing to remember are things we talked about. In addition, remember that everything in the chart is confidential. Your responsibility is to only share it with those individuals within the care of that resident. And you have to be really careful. I don't think I shared this story with you, but we had with my husband's ambulance service, we had a gentleman that fell down at the Poinsett Hotel. Had I shared this with you all?
Yeah.
About finding him on Facebook?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, but that's again where I took care of him in the pre-hospital setting.
Right.
And I worked for the hospital, I wanted to check on him. I have no right to do that.
Right.
And so just be really careful that you're sure that whoever you're sharing the information is does have a direct relationship with that patient in terms of care. Okay. All right, that completes chapter 14. You're going to move on to chapter